Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. This evening, I'm delighted to be joined by author Chris Bridges, and we're going to be talking about Chris's latest book, which is called The Deathbed and is out this Thursday, the 26th. Yep. Hi, Chris. Really lovely for you to join us again.
Yeah, nice to be here again.
Thank you. We spoke about 12 months ago, maybe even slightly less. I can't remember, but
slightly less, yeah.
Your book, which I'm going to remember, is definitely had sick in the title, and I should have written this down.
Sick to Death.
Sick to Death, that was it. Yeah. And now the Deathbed is your second novel. And would you like to introduce it and to yourself to people who aren't aware of you?
So it's another standalone domestic psychological thriller. So The Deathbed is about a nurse called Laura, and it's set in 2010 initially, and it's during the time of the Icelandic ash cloud when it grounded planes all over Europe. So Laura is a nurse living in Derbyshire. She's quite uptight, struggles to communicate with people around her, feels quite shut off, but is a very good nurse, very capable. And Laura gets a kind of blast from the past that is exactly what she doesn't want. So 16 years previously, when Laura was a student nurse, she lived in London and shared a house with a flamboyant, vintage-loving, red-headed older woman called Sadie. And Laura gets a call, a visit, to say that Sadie is unwell and she's at the end of her life, unfortunately, and doesn't have anyone to look after her apart from her teenage daughter. Husband's trapped overseas due to the ice cloud. So Laura reluctantly goes back. She hasn't actually spoken to Sadie since the final day of their nurse training 16 years before. And the reason for that is that something really terrible happened that resulted in a death. And there's some culpability. So Laura goes back. Sadie's very delirious intermittently, and Laura becomes very concerned about what Sadie's saying. So the book is a dual timeline story. So it's partly set in the early 90s and partly set in 2010, which was quite difficult to write.
Yeah, I've got that as one of my questions, actually.
Yeah, we'll get to that then.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a real sort of page turner, and
oh, thank you.
And you do sort of tackle quite difficult subjects. So this one we've got palliative care, which is, actually I couldn't think of another book where that's actually featured. And obviously you come from the sort of nursing profession, don't you, in a previous previous life.
I was a palliative care nurse for quite a long time.
So what you know is definitely
exactly. The first book was about illness, because I've got a chronic illness, I've got MS, and the second book is about nursing. So I'm kind of running out of things to write now.
But it's really interesting. So what was the sort of inspiration for the story? Was it your sort of experience of being a palliative care nurse that sort of?
Not entirely. I think I can remember what it stemmed from. Was that I just remember a particular nurse who was an excellent nurse who the patients were really fond of, and she was really, really good at her job, but she was really difficult to the point where she would go and take her breaks alone, like deliberately time them so that she wouldn't have to speak to anyone, and she didn't really speak to her colleagues. I'm not naming any names at all. In fact, I can't even remember her name. It's a vague, just a thing that stuck in my mind. It wasn't even a major event. It wasn't anyone I worked with. And it's sort of, I thought, gosh, what could be behind that? And then your mind starts to tick and it goes over and over. I did want to write about nursing, because I think that nursing's often written about in quite a strange way. It's kind of either, I think there's two camps really, especially with crime fiction. In crime fiction, it's either the serial killer nurse who's bumping off the patients, or it's the kind of angelic, like, oh, you're so good, kind of that kind of nurse who saw that kind of cliched character. And I very much didn't want to go down the route of the kind of serial killer nurse who's going to slaughter patients, because that just wasn't my vibe. I've nothing against those kind of stories. They're fine, but they're not entirely for me. And I think, whenever that happens in real life, when there's a nurse who gets involved in there's something hideous, I find it really painful to kind of hear about. so I kind of want to write about nurses who killed each other, kind of more than more than the patients. And I think, you know, Laura's quite explicit really in the book and saying that she's done something very bad, but it doesn't involve a patient, and she would never do that. That's like a line she would not cross. There's certain lines she will cross. But yeah, I think the palliative care thing. So when I qualified, I sort of did general nursing. Then the last 15 years of my nursing career, I was a palliative care nurse, like a specialist nurse. So I think I suppose it's an easy knowledge. And it's an interesting environment. The kind of thought that someone might have delirium or they might be on lots of medications. There's lots of scope there. It's also a reason why people might have to congregate again who don't want to be together, because there's a need to kind of do stuff. So it kind of had those kind of devices worked within that framework. So I kind of quite liked that device. I think it kind of grew organically. I actually wrote this book as the first book that I ever wrote. So I wrote a version of this book. It's definitely not this book. So I decided that I was going to write a book, and I was going to write about a group of nurses who did something dastardly, but it was a very different storyline. And I submitted it to about 5 agents, then another 5, and then eventually it ended up about 60 agents I submitted it to.
Wow.
And I got feedback from 2 agents who said, "We think that you write really well. We just don't like the story." So I was like, okay, so in that case, I'll write another story. So I thought, okay, this is really promising. 2 people think, I didn't see it as a fail. I saw it as like, this is success. Like 2 people from the industry think I can write. So I wrote Sick to Death. And that's where my career launched. But I kind of thought, yeah, I'd quite like to go back to that story, but actually apply all the things I know since. Because since I wrote that book, I actually went on a writers program that was a 9-month program that I got a place on in London for underrepresented writers, the London Writers Award. I'd sort of read more around the subject, and obviously I've worked with editors. So I think what had failed in the first book was that the plot didn't work. It kind of was a bit turgid, and it kind of didn't have the proper arc and that kind of thing. So I thought I could just get that book out and edit it, but I thought that would be painful. So I decided to just start from page 1. The 2 main characters were in the original book. The rest, nobody else was. So the whole thing is very different, and the whole storyline is different. But it was kind of the thing they probably say you should never do, which is to go back to something that didn't work.
Well, then it obviously did work. It was just maybe because you didn't have those. I don't want to say skills, but
no, I think that's
sort of
that was it.
That honing of what of bringing. Because I imagine it's quite different to the original.
I think it is. I think I had an innate understanding because I'm such an avid reader. I read constantly, and I think I sort of understood the nature of a story arc, but I don't think I understood enough. I think I needed to hone it more and to kind of actually, to have more proper theory behind it. So I think all the lectures that we had during the London Writers Award and the different books that I read kind of helped me to understand actually things about like having a midpoint in the plot, rising action and falling action. And I think I just hadn't understood those things. I think I just thought you wrote a story, kind of.
Because your characters, and I know that I've seen other people say this, and I think you said so yourself, that you don't always write likable characters. And I wouldn't say that any of the people in this book I particularly warmed to, but actually I always think that's a really good sign of a good psychological thriller or a crime book, because I think it makes you more invested. Because if you don't care about the characters and they don't evoke any emotion in you, for me, it's like, what's the point of reading it? If I don't care, that's it for me. I'm like, I'm done. So is that important to you? Is that
I think one of the things, so when Sick to Death went out to publishing houses to sell, with the agent put it out, we got loads of kickback from people saying we don't like the main character, she's too unlikable. And then when I actually finally signed with HarperCollins, with Avon, they said it doesn't matter about the fact she's likable. What matters is that you can root for her. And I thought that's really interesting, actually. I hadn't thought of it in those ways before. And they said there's ways of kind of, we maybe just need to make her someone you'd root for a little bit more, someone who's got something you can kind of feel empathy for, and we kind of did some tweaks there. So I think, for me it's quite funny because I don't always think they're unlikable. I kind of write them and I think they're okay, and then it's only afterwards like people are like, yeah, they're not very likable either. I'm like, oh, okay, really? Is that true? But yeah, I think it's about whether you can root for them, whether you actually care. I think Laura's probably got a lot of qualities that I personally would root for. I think she's an outsider and she's kind of othered in a way because she grew up in a difficult family, a dysfunctional family, which she got a sister who had addiction issues, and Laura was the kind of one who was left behind, and kind of all the attention was diverted to her sister. And they lived in quite a sort of poor environment as well, which wasn't helped by her sister's sort of issues. So Laura got herself out of that through education, and she managed to find a scholarship and went to a private school thinking that everything would be fine. And then she was really othered because she was seen as being lower class and kind of different from the other children who were fee-paying children. She was like the one scholarship student. So she ended up kind of having a really difficult time at school, and then left school, and she was changed by the fact she'd been to private school because her accent had changed a little bit. She got a different level of education from the people around her. So she then goes to nursing college thinking, oh, well, kind of it'll be fine. And it kind of isn't. And so she hangs on and ends up descending into a toxic friendship. So I think for me, that kind of quality makes me empathize with her and makes me kind of want to root for her. I mean, she's not the most reliable of narrators always, but I quite like an unreliable narrator.
Oh yeah, definitely. I do. I think that I think also that if they were, I think if, like you said about the nurses at the beginning, if you sort of write them, you sort of want to not, although she's working palliative care, and you sort of, she's a good person for doing that, but there is something that she's done in her past that is bad, and but she fesses up to that quite. We know that. We know that she's done something bad, so quite often bad people don't know when they've done bad things.
True,
that made me sort of think, well, maybe she's not that bad.
She's got an element of kind of, she came into nursing with an element of PTSD from something that happened at school, and then she's kind of also got cumulative issues as well, which is, and it's quite I suppose I always think it must be difficult if you've got trauma from something terrible that happened, that you've got some guilt around, or some criminal liability around, then you couldn't go to a therapist, could you? Like we could if we were traumatized by seeing an accident in the street or something terrible, or a crime. But if you've committed the crime, you can't go to a therapist and say, oh yeah, I just want to talk to you about the time I murdered someone because it's left me really messed up, because it's just not going to work. There's a limit to confidentiality, isn't there? Unless you tell the priest. I think the priest's allowed to not tell anyone, aren't they, or something?
Well, I don't know. I think there's the whole thing, isn't there? Especially with like doctors and things. There's that thing of that if you're going to sort of, if you're going to hurt someone else, or or yourself, but then it's like, what happens if you've already hurt someone else?
Yeah, true.
So it's
a difficult one, isn't it? And I think I kind of felt quite empathetic towards Laura, because I think we all have that kind of awkwardness, don't we? And kind of when we feel uncomfortable, and I think she kind of embodies that quite a lot as well. I kind of thought Sadie was fun because of her flamboyancy, and I think I probably was blinded to all the bad qualities around her because the rage issues she's got and things. She was a great one to write, and I quite like 50s clothes as well. So because she's in 50s decor and interiors, so because she's got all of that stuff.
Was it quite, when you sort of form them in your head, do you sort of have a picture of them? Do you sort of know what they look like?
Yeah, it's a strange thing actually, because when I was younger, I used to have a really vivid mental image, and there's this thing, isn't there, where you can kind of gauge, because some people have zero mental image, don't they? And they just think in words, and there's actually no mental image whatsoever. And there's a test you can do with imagining an apple, I think they tend to use. And when I was younger, I used to be able to like see the apple, like every single bit of the skin, and I could see it 3D almost. But as I've got older, it's changed a lot, and it's much more vague. So sometimes the images I have of people are a little bit vague, and whether that's stuff to do with illness, because I've had problems with my brain with the MS, but or whether it's just a part of the aging process, I don't really know. So I didn't have I had very vivid images of Sadie's clothes and her hair and her demeanor and kind of makeup and those kind of things. I even had a list of Sadie's clothes actually, because I've got loads of books of like Vogue fashion from the 1950s and things like that. So I'm not a huge researcher, but I actually, and another thing, I don't really enjoy reading about people's clothes in books personally. Sometimes when authors describe a person's clothes and they go into too much detail, I find it a bit hard to imagine it, because they can often seem what seems okay to one person or sounds okay on the page or looks okay in the flesh sounds strange on the page. So you could say, I mean, like now I could say, oh, I'm wearing yellow trousers and a pink shirt, which I am, and it sounds a bit weird if you read it on the page.
That's a bit like Mr. Bobby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Sadie's clothes felt really important because it's part of her persona, is that she's
and I think
a bit of a clothes
I am like what you said about the visual. I do sort of really visualize what people, look like are. So for me, I quite like that. So, when people sort of describe.
As long as I think if someone over describes someone in a book, sometimes that can be difficult, because then you're sort of trying to force yourself into a
too
kind
much
of
information.
category. I think the worst thing for me is if they'll say something like, "Oh, he had a slight look of Daniel Craig," or she looked to me like Helen Mirren, and I'm like, "Well, that's it now, because I'm going to imagine them as Helen Mirren." That's kind of, you've done it for me; it's ruined. But yeah, I did have an image of them. I think, especially, I think Sadie's quite arresting in a sort of. She's an arresting character who kind of draws gazers wherever she goes, because she's kind of dressed in all this kind of finery, and she's got this piled up hennaed red hair and that kind of stuff.
And her daughter Elsie is who comes to find Laura, isn't it, to tell her that her mum's sick and that she needs her. She knows that, she knows she's got a nursing background and she wants her to come and sort of look after her. And there's a bit of guilt in there, isn't there, for Laura? She knows that she doesn't want to do it, but she knows she's going to do it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I think that comes from me as well, because I think if someone asked me, probably not now, because I think it would take it out of me too much with illness and stuff, but I think previously, if someone had asked me to look after somebody, I'd probably, try and help as much as I could, and I think especially if it was an old friend who I'd been very close to, even if there'd been a rift, I'd probably feel obliged. And I think as well, there are gaps in the care system, and I think, as we all know, and I think if you are someone who's alone and you've just got an adolescent or teenager with you, the gaps in the care are very difficult, because regardless of who's there, if you're struggling with really poorly controlled pain or things like that, then being at home and having sort of, you've not got 24-hour nursing there, it can be quite difficult, even with on-call services, with the best will in the world. And because Sadie's got this kind of, she's very fixated on the house that she lives in, Laurel House, and she doesn't want to leave the house to go into hospice care or go into hospital as well. It's like super important to her that she stays there. So so I kind of thought that is a situation that would make Laura feel compelled to go there.
I feel And did they surprise you, the characters, at any point in the book?
I don't know that they did. I'm not a massive planner, so I'm sort of in between the two. I'm not one of these people who just like sits there and writes and sees what happens. But equally, I don't plan every single chapter and every kind of beat or whatever, or action kind of thing. But I like to kind of know, well, I have to know the way the book opens and what the sort of setup is. And then I have to know what happens in the middle, because I think the middle bit is really important. So I think people underestimate the importance of a midpoint in dramas. And often when you watch television, you can see really clear midpoints as the drama progresses. And reading as well, you sometimes get to like 50% through the book, and it's like, oh, okay, this is where things start to change. Kind of, it's very different. So I kind of like to know the beginning, the middle, and the end very clearly, with maybe a few bits along the way. So I don't think they did surprise me a great deal. Maybe because I'd already part written the book anyway as well, and then scrapped it, and it was still kind of similar in a way. They were fun characters to write. I mean, I had a bit of a. There's the thing, isn't there? Difficult second novel syndrome, and that definitely came. I think the pressure of kind of suddenly knowing that you're not just writing for yourself in your back bedroom, that you're now writing for a publisher. And I'd been shortlisted for a national award for like the Theakston's Old Peculier McDermid debut award and things like that. It's kind of like, oh gosh, suddenly there's an expectation, and there's also a time frame as well, because I signed a book a year contract for 2 books, so it's kind of no choice really. You've got to do it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's much more pressure the second. They always say the difficult second novel, because like you said, totally. You're not doing it for yourself anymore, and it's not going to take you, like some people takes 10 years to write a book, or you don't have that luxury of time.
I think the other thing often as well is with a novel, often you've been brewing it for so long as well, and often with people's first novel, it's been like bashing around in the head for such a long period of time, and then all of a sudden you've got to write this book. It's a difficult one. I think the majority of authors probably get this kind of thing that happens, and then you get difficult third novel after that.
We'll come on to that one in a minute.
Yeah.
So at the beginning we talked about the sort of the timeline, and sort of so the then is like 1991 when they're like at nursing school, and then we're in the now is 2010. How you said that was difficult to write? Did you write them as like 2 separate narratives? Did you write them as a continuous?
Yeah, I wrote them as a continuous narrative, because I do quite like that thing where kind of things link up. So like, for example, there's a bit where they're in college and they're kind of having to learn how to bathe a patient, and then when it opens again, Sadie and Laura in the present day, and Laura's having to help Sadie do things, kind of, so I kind of like that kind of link in, so it's kind of makes it feel more continuous. So I think I found it easier to write them all as in a row. And then when you get the edits back from the publishers, they're kind of like, oh, actually we need a bit more of the 1990s here, or a bit more of the 2010s here, and it kind of all falls apart a bit, and you have to kind of put it back together again. The 90s were probably the hardest bit to write, because I kind of naively thought to myself, I was in my early 20s in the 90s, and I thought, it was only the other week, kind of, it's just not very so it's really easy to write. I can remember it all, but it turns out I can't remember anything. Not through any kind of substances I was taking, that was at all, but I was working, kind of. I could remember the hospital. I remembered exactly what a 90s hospital was like. That was easy. What was difficult was the bits out of hospital. Sadie's house was easy, because Sadie's house didn't look like a 90s house. Sadie's house was done up to look like a 1950s house.
50s house,
or very kind of vintage, and very kind of curtains under the sink, and those kind of like melamine tables and things like that, Formica or whatever. And but it was the clothes, so I kind of couldn't remember what clothes people wore, and I was trying to think. I thought, well, what did I wear in the 90s? And I had lots of memories of wearing really baggy clothes that were quite grey, and I was like, surely we wore more than that. So I went online and I kept looking up 90s fashion, and I was going to website after website after website, and all you seem to get up is you'll get the Chanel collection 1992 or whatever, or the Gucci one, and nobody wore those clothes. No one wears catwalk clothes. It's not a thing. You don't wear that in like Saffron Walden down the middle of the high street. It's not the thing. So I kind of eventually I thought to myself, well, people wore grunge clothes. I remember those, and there is a character in there who's into grunge who wears those clothes. So Amy, the younger nurse. But I asked around, and I went on social media and I said, what did people wear in the 90s? And people came back and said, grey, baggy clothes. So it was like everybody seemed to wear just...
I spent most of the 1990... 96 and 99. I was pregnant then, so I was wearing hideous maternity clothes. Which nobody wears anymore, because...
And they were they were bad, weren't they?
They were terrible. I had
tents.
Yeah, I had like a big tent dress and dungarees. That was basically it.
And you could buy them in Mothercare, couldn't you? And
Mothercare, that was it. And there wasn't any. Whereas people just wear normal clothes now. They don't do that. But I do remember jeans and t-shirts. It wasn't like
there was
the 80s.
Lots of camouflage trousers, like camisole tops, and kind of. But it wasn't the most colourful of decades.
No, it was like All Saints. Do you remember them? They all were
totally, all of that.
the sort of cargo trousers and
exactly, all that stuff. And I wrote a scene in the book that then later got cut where they were in a nightclub, and it kind of got reduced and cut and all changed around. But I wrote this scene and I was trying to think, what was a nightclub like in the 90s? And I spent time in nightclubs in the 90s. Gosh, I'm so glad I've not got to do that anymore. It sounds like it's like the worst thing imaginable, isn't it? And I was trying to think, what would a 90s nightclub feel like? So I thought, well, it would smell of cigarettes. That would
I was going to say smoky, sticky floor.
Sticky floor. And then I thought, well, kind of what would people drink? And so I was like, okay, so this was supposed to be about 92. So I thought, okay, they'd be drinking Bacardi breezers.
Taboo and lemonade.
In the 90s. Yeah. Taboo and lemonade. Yeah. And then I thought, I thought the men would probably be wearing a bit of Lynx Africa sprayed all over. And, then everyone would be wearing CK1, the unisex perfume that was like the big thing.
Yeah.
So I wrote the scene. And then when I went to do the edit, I mean, luckily, we have copy editors. So the final edit you get is somebody whose job is to check for accuracy and check for continuity and stuff like that as well. So I thought I better check these things. So I looked them up, and every single thing I'd written about wasn't invented in that year. So it's like Lynx Africa was much later in the 90s. So was CK1. So was the Bacardi Breezer. All of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is why I don't write historical novels. Why I write crime, because you have to look things up. Like every time someone strikes a match, you've got to think, oh, it's 1854. Did they have matches?
Yeah.
So
you don't think about that in sort of contemporary, but. Like as we said, 1990 was only yesterday, so we shouldn't have to go back to that.
It's 35 years ago, isn't it? So essentially, I have accidentally written a historical novel without meaning to.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
I know. Yeah, the interesting thing about the 90s, though, because I kind of thought, well, what is about the 90s that was so different from now? In what ways were we different as people? And I thought it's communication, really, because we were on the kind of verge of having a communication change. So I can remember we didn't really have computers and stuff. There was just like occasionally there was those huge computers with the kind of green. I thought this is something that in a crime novel can be really important. So communication was like postcards, letters, kind of phone calls. But if you were arranged to meet a friend outside the cinema at 6 o'clock and you were running late, they either waited or they didn't. That was kind of it, wasn't it? So, and I thought the opportunity for misconnection between people is something that I can use within the book. And I use that quite heavily kind of within certain parts of the book. There was a thing I can remember. I didn't actually live in a nurse's home when I did my nurse training. I actually already was renting a house with a partner who I was living with. But I can remember visiting the nurse's home, and there was a communal telephone that just seemed to ring day and night.
Oh, in the hallway. My sister had one of those at uni. I remember ringing her and like having some random person answer the phone and say, "Can you go and knock on door 27?"
Well, the other thing they did was they would write on the wall, kind of, or there'd be a pad on the wall with a pen. There'd be a pen attached to the phone on a piece of string, and they'd just write like notes on the wall for people, or they'd write on a piece of paper like Jane, mum called. So it's just so haphazard, isn't it? All of it kind of, and it's like quite different, really. You can't imagine kind of. I think it's so insidious how things change, isn't it? The gradual takeover from like no means of communication, having these means of communication, but being slightly reluctant to maybe leaving your mobile phone at home, to now I won't go to the corner shop without it, in case someone gets run over and I need to ring 999 or whatever.
I remember reading the other day somewhere about saying that the sort of generation X is the generation which has had the most technological change. You've basically gone from, like, I remember not having a phone in our house. And then to having a phone in our house, to, like you say, to like 50 years later to be walking around with a phone sellotape to my hand.
When I left home at the end of the 80s, very end of the 80s, I lived in a flat. I was only a teenager and we didn't have a phone at all. You used to have to go and queue outside the phone box and wait for other people to finish if I wanted to phone my mum or anything. It's strange, isn't it? And I can remember as a child, we had what was called a party line, which was where they didn't have enough phone lines to go around because they'd not built enough. So people had to share a phone line. So you'd pick the phone up. I mean, this is a great thing. Maybe I shouldn't say this. I can use this in a crime novel. You used to pick the phone up. I'm sure someone has at some point used this in a crime novel, and you'd hear someone else having a conversation, and you'd be like, "Oh, this is really awkward. Do I just put the phone down, or do I say something?" Or and then eventually, if you kept, you'd be like, "Will you be much longer?" You can just quite imagine it, can you? It's so intrusive and embarrassing, isn't it?
It is, but it's really. But I think all these things really sort of lend themselves to crime novels, and I think that's why historic.
100%.
If you go back to, why people tend to set books in the past, because you have got more freedom to be otherwise, unless you put them in a place where they're cut off by the snow or a storm or an island or something where you haven't got them. It's really hard to have that isolation.
I don't know how people commit crimes nowadays with all these doorbell cameras and goodness knows what. You're always being watched, aren't you? It's really difficult, isn't it? When I was doing the copy edits for Sick to Death, the copy editor came back to me, and there was a scene in public where something had happened. I'm going to have to be like deliberately vague about this. Something terrible had happened, and I'd written that a black cab went by because it was in London, and the copy editor came back and said, "You're going to have to elaborate on this at some point because the black cab will have a dash cam." And I was like, what? So anyway, I just deleted black cab and changed it to a white van. So I thought, who wants to go through all of that sort of like ins and outs of the black cab versus kind of cameras? It's not going to help the plot or make the book more exciting. Let's just get rid of it. But it must be really difficult to, I mean, it's not something I've ever think about outside of my strange Google searches that I do.
No. That's one thing, isn't it? They always say that sort of crime writers, if they ever were to look at their Google searches, that if you were ever to be sort of arrested and they looked at your sort of what sort of thing would come up, on your Google search.
I did it today because I was trying to remember what happens in a post-mortem, and I was thinking, I'm sure it's like what they'll call a Y incision, where they cut in a Y, and then I was like, but maybe I've just imagined that or got it from television. It's inaccurate. So I'm like Googling, where is the first cut made in a post-mortem? I think that's not good, is it? And then there was something about drowning the other week. So not good at all. Awkward.
I think there's probably quite a lot of you out there of people who
I'm sure.
You sort of touched on the nurses' home, and you said you didn't live in them, but actually she does live in the nurses' home.
Yeah.
And I guess you visited them as sort of a student. And are they like sort of halls of residence? It's sort of like uni.
It was quite archaic, the one at the hospital where I worked, and there was like an old 1930s one, and then there was another one that was like a 60s tower block, and they were pretty hideous, really. But I was kind of envious in a way, because I wasn't in the best of relationships, and I kind of, in a way, that I thought they seemed to have more fun. They were the ones going to raves and kind of, turning up and being sick before they started shift because they were so hungover, kind of, and I was like just coming to work. But in retrospect, it was probably a lot better what I was doing, but it always looks a bit better on the other side, doesn't it?
Definitely.
I think hospitals are an amazing fertile landscape for crime. I think hospitals, I think there's a lot of sort of things that happen in hospitals, like violence, confusion, death, of course, is there, or it's an ever-present kind of thing in a hospital. And it's it's kind of a fearful kind of place sometimes as well. I mean, for me, it's a very comfortable place, and it's somewhere where I always felt I wanted to make other people feel comfortable and not feel afraid, kind of. It's something that I've seen kind of from both sides as well, with having been ill as well. But it's definitely got, I think if you've ever worked a night shift in a hospital, in a Victorian hospital, you kind of like quite aware just how creepy a hospital can be.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is they're big, sort of big, old, creaky places where, like you say, there is death around the corner, in a lot of places. And particularly
early on in the book, there's a scene where Sadie and Laura go over from the nursing college to the hospital to go to the canteen to actually visit the hospital for the first time, while before they go on placement, and a trolley passes them, and Laura's quite like totally naive and unaware that it's a mortuary trolley, kind of that there's a body just going right by them inches away, and it's quite a culture shock to her. And I remember actually that's probably based on my own experience. I think kind of you just very quickly have to get used to those things that kind of are abnormal, kind of the abnormal becomes normal very quickly. And we used to have a room where nurses could go smoke, which was quite a popular pastime at that time. And I used to smoke. So on a night shift, you used to get a break quite late into the night. We'd kind of have 2 breaks, one like midnightish, and then one probably about 3 a.m. or later. And I used to go, the characters in the book actually meet in the smoking room, and I used to go and we'd try and arrange to meet other student nurses in there, because all the student nurses would get the same break across the wards at one point. And so you'd have to walk right down the hospital. You'd be there and all you'd hear was your own footsteps and this kind of like the lighting turned slightly down, and there was a chapel there and you could see the illuminated cross that was in there, and it was just the whole thing used to feel really quite creepy.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously. I must admit, I'm a bit of a hospital phobe, so I'm like the opposite of you.
It's a tough read.
Well, it was interesting because you've got your little sort of trigger warning at the beginning, and I was a bit like, oh, but actually, no, I didn't find it.
That's good.
I didn't find it difficult. I don't. I
tried not to be gory. There is a scene where someone bleeds, but I think other than that, I did try not to be too grotesque. Because I think it's quite difficult, because I think as a nurse sometimes my bar of what's horrible, I think most nurses learn that you've got to moderate yourself, because you forget kind of, and you'll just be talking to people and you're like, oh gosh, these are normal people, they don't want to hear about that.
That's not find that as well, like you become, I guess you become hardened isn't the right word, but sort of conditioned, like to
an extent. I mean, I think people used to say to me, how do you do your job? Because my job towards that sort of latterly in my career was that I would be with patients with end stage cancers or like life limiting or terminal illnesses. And that was my job all day. And people would say, I don't know how you do it, it's too sad. And I'd kind of think, well, I haven't just walked off the street to do this kind of, this has kind of been built up throughout my career, and I've got experience and kind of coping mechanisms. I mean, it had its difficult moments as well, but also it was a very satisfying sort of. I think there's a kind of trope, isn't there, that nurses are kind of angelic, and it kind of, I think, I'm sure one of the characters probably says this in the book, but because it's one of my bugbears, but I think nurses are on a continuum. We're either utterly angelic or we're terrible, kind of depending on what the press think that week. But often we're either feckless and lazy, or asking for too much money, or we're complete angels who've like saved the world from COVID, and we need pots and pans banging for us, and that kind of thing. And it's so often people will say that as well. And it's a lovely thing to someone to say, oh, you're so special for doing this, or you're such an angel, or you must be so patient. And like outside of work, I'm really not patient. Like I'm the one who kind of gets irritated by the dog, whereas my partner doesn't. Kind of. But at work, I think 99% of the time or more, I was utterly patient and could like cope with kind of the difficult things and with people. But it's a strange thing, and it's
I think that's work, isn't it, though, as well? It's like you can I think when you're at work, you are a different person than you are, because you have expectations of what you're supposed to do, and or if you're like if you're a sort of a supervisor or something, you have sort of that sort of responsibility. And I imagine the same with nursing. You've got a huge responsibility to
I think dressing up helps as well. Having a costume helps, because if you're in fancy dress, so kind of being a nurse is like a costume. You're kind of you put the clothes on. I would instantly become less squeamish the minute I'd got my nurse's uniform on, because I don't like people being sick. That's a big no for me.
Me neither.
No, and it actually makes me feel nauseated. But
me too.
But strangely, and that was the biggest thing that worried me when I started my nursing. I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this because of how that makes me feel. But when I had my uniform on, fine. The minute my uniform was off, it was a different story. Strange, isn't
it? Almost like a shield. like a
Totally, yeah, like a
yeah,
superhero costume. Yeah, I think I've definitely got imposter syndrome as an author, like most authors do, because it's such a strange thing to do.
yeah,
But I had imposter syndrome for 30 years as a nurse as well. So I used to be, I think I was continually, even like, I was a ward manager on a liver unit, kind of like, I was the senior charge nurse, and I still felt like I didn't know what I was doing, kind of, and I was just faking it. But I mean, in retrospect, I really, really did know what I was doing most of the time.
yeah,
And if I didn't, I'd ask. But yeah, it's kind of a strange thing. I think so many people in life is about imposter syndrome, isn't it? Unless
yeah,
you've got some
definitely.
sort of narcissistic streak, you think
Yeah,
you're the
yeah. No, I
best
think most
president in
people
America
do.
ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think there's many people who, well, I mean, like you say, unless you're a narcissist who, you
Yeah.
know,
Or there's different reasons, aren't there? But yeah, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? And I think nursing is one of the strange things about nursing as well that always really fascinated me is that you've got to get this acceptance of risk. So much like any kind of medical job at all, or you've got to accept that you sort of go into the job thinking, oh my goodness, if I make a mistake giving this medication, then someone could die.
yeah,
And it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And you deal with some like really terrifying drugs, or if I forget to tell someone that this has happened, or if I get this wrong, or all this kind of if, and
yeah,
the the trick I think is that you have to learn that you still need to remember that, and you've got to have that in your mind. You can't ever be like, I don't care whether that happens, because that would be really bad.
yeah,
But you've got to learn to live with that. So you've got to learn to live with this kind of risk, this element of risk all of the time. And I'm
yeah,
sure there are lots of jobs that are like that as well, like, social work or whatever as well. Like if you,
yeah.
or,
Or anything where
or
you're
policing,
dealing with,
whatever, or, yeah, or the
yeah,
courts, there's so many jobs where there's an element that if you do something wrong, yeah. But it's the thing is not to forget that, is to learn to deal with it. And it's
yeah,
quite a strange position. It's quite a weird kind of way to live and think and have to sort
yeah.
of have your life.
Well,
Um,
it's the opposite. I
but
think most of the jobs that I've worked in, I always say, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to die if we don't do that.
yeah,
Whereas
whereas mine was
actually,
that
yours is
they
the
probably
complete opposite.
would.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
I would not be good at being in the hospital.
you probably would have. I think you just get used to it, and it kind of
Well, yeah, I
becomes
think like you
like a sort
say,
of
but then
nature to you. But
there's
it's
things
still
that
like
you do.
there's always like sort of, I can remember. I mean, once I was a charge nurse, I didn't really work nights very often, but I would do the odd night shift so that I kind of kept up on top of what was going on. And you'd often get like, especially the newly qualified nurses who were kind of in this transitional state where it was really difficult. They'd often ring up and say, I don't think I did this, kind of, or I don't think I gave some insulin, or I don't think I did that. And I used to be like, okay, so this is a totally normal thing that happens to all nurses.
Yeah,
I've been through it, and the weight of the responsibility of becoming a qualified nurse, and kind of
yeah,
I'll 100% go and check, but I'm pretty sure
that you
that you
have.
don't need to worry about this, and you can now park this and don't worry. And literally, please feel reassured that this happens to everybody.
Yeah,
It's a rite of passage almost. This is something that's going to happen, and you'll still probably do it in about 20 years, but just not as often.
yeah.
But
Well, I
yeah,
think it's
nurses.
like
I
you
think
always
the
think
interesting,
about things, don't you? About like you've
yeah,
forgotten, but then I can sort of park it and think, oh well, I'll do that tomorrow. But you can't do
yeah.
that with people.
No, I think if you've forgotten their insulin and they're going to go into a kind of hyperglycemic coma, it's kind of a
Yeah,
worry, isn't it? And you definitely can't just go to bed and sleep on that one. It
no.
nags at you. I think that's the thing with nurses as well, why they've often have featured in crime stories, because a nurse has got kind of, well, and doctors as well, of course, or any medical health
Mm,
professionals. There's an element of kind of life or death in their hands, isn't there? And there's an element
yeah,
of power and control. And there's also that duality, isn't there? That a nurse is supposed to be someone who's caring and soft and kind, but
yeah,
but it's equally possible that something terrible could happen in their personal life that doesn't change them as a kind of soft, kind nurse, but they're
yeah,
also pretty terrible for a murder or whatever, or kind of, or theft even. The sort of things that can happen.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
How did
interesting to
you
think what.
sort of? Did you always know how the book was going to end? With the twists and the
No.
turns.
I did know how the book was going to end, although bits kept changing. I kind of knew the final big thing, and
Yeah,
then there's an epilogue, but kind of that bit I didn't know. That just like appeared to me. So yeah, going back to the previous question, one character did surprise me. He did do something very shocking and surprising. Yeah, so that did come to me quite late. Kind of just came, probably during a dog walk or something. Yeah. It's a strange thing. So the last few months, I had a bit of a flare up with the multiple sclerosis, and I've not been like, unable to walk or anything like that, but I get chronic fatigue with it. And so I've had loads of fatigue. So I haven't been out of the house very much over the last 3 months. I get the odd sort of run of a few days where I'm okay, but then I'll kind of be in the house for 2 weeks. And it's made writing so much more difficult because the act of dog walking.
You haven't got that sort of away time.
It's so strange. That kind of motion. I think Agatha Christie said that if you're stuck with writing, go and wash the dishes. That was one of her things. I think you can see that you get that on tea towels, don't you, and things. But so it's a strange thing, isn't it?
I do it if I'm like if I'm at work and I'm doing something where I just need a break, I'll go and like wash the dishes or wipe the sides down or something. It's just that mind like just switch off brain, isn't it, mode?
Well, I sometimes do it when I'm writing, so I'll kind of write for about 45 minutes, and then sometimes I'll just go and do a little tidy up, because I'm quite a bit of, at the moment I'm going through hell because the house is in carnage because of the house renovation, but usually I'm quite sort of like, it's that sense of control and order, and it kind of just like is mindless as well. There's nothing to think about, is there? I can do it kind of like muscle memory. It's kind of a thing, isn't it?
I find the Hoover is just very, like you can just sort of push the Hoover around, and it's just it's just good. It's just movement, but just mindless movement.
In retrospect, actually, I can remember being 21, which was in the early 90s, and somebody bought me a birthday card, and it was Elvis with a Hoover, and it said Hoover Las Vegas. So even then I must have been at the age of 21, I was an atypical cleanliness freak and kind of loved a bit of order. And I sometimes wonder if that's why I took to crime novels. I think P.D. James said that the reason she chose to write crime novels was she liked the order of a crime novel, because there's often a reckoning in a crime novel, and kind of things get tied up, especially in a more traditional whodunit novel with the detective. There's like a kind of terrible mess, and then it gradually gets explained. And in a psychological thriller, there's often unanswered questions that then get slowly explained, and kind of it all becomes a pattern that meshes together. And I think there's a kind of thing there, isn't there? It must suit a particular kind of mind.
I think so. Yeah, maybe I'd never thought of it like that, but I do really like that, and I'm a complete control freak, so I definitely, I like that sort of. And I think, who did you? I think when we spoke last time, did you say what your favorite? We were talking about favorite writers, and I sort of thought Agatha Christie was in there for you.
Yeah, pretty much. James, probably, P.D. James and Ruth Rendell was a favorite, but particularly the Barbara Vine books. When I was a teenager, and when I was adolescent, I was 11. I started reading Agatha Christie's. I read Mrs. McGinty's Dead. And
I'm just reading that at the moment.
Such good fun. Good denouement in that one. It's very clever. So I read that one, and I thought, wow, this is really good fun. I really like this. And then I gradually read all of the Agatha Christie's in the school library. Then I went around all like jumble sales in churches and bought Agatha Christie's, and I kind of worked my way through them. And my favorite one of all was And Then There Were None, which is so dark, dark. It's darker than anything I've ever written, actually, to be honest. It's so dark. And then I kind of moved on, and I started to like, back then they used to call them whodunits, which was the thing that sounds so quaint, doesn't it? And it was like psychological thrillers. And my favorite writer was Ruth Rendell, because Ruth Rendell would write. She used to seem to release a Wexford book, which was a detective fiction book, but often with a social issue. They were very socially driven. And then she'd release a psychological thriller. So, but my favorites were the psychological thrillers, and they were always very domestic, and they were often about people who'd got obsessions, and she got very obsessive characters, like she had an obsession with obsession. And then she wrote some ones where she wrote them under the pen name Barbara Vine, and she did those ones as a kind of much deeper dive into psychological sort of fiction and people's psyche, and they were really good books. Funnily enough, I did a podcast and I recommended a book, and I couldn't remember when it was from, and I said, oh, it's probably like late 80s, and it was from It's Ruth Rendell's A Judgment in Stone, which I would recommend to everybody. It's an essential book. It's such a clever book. And it was actually from 1977.
Wow.
And it's probably, I think it was quite pivotal. I can't think of anything around that time that's similar. And the book opens by telling you that this woman, Eunice Parchman, was unable to read or write, and because of that, she murdered a family. She killed the family who she worked for because she was a domestic kind of thing. And it's like present day, and then the book explains what happened, kind of, and you know all along, and there's occasional flash forwards to the death, and you kind of see that this kind of wealthy family didn't do very well thanks to Eunice, but it's such a clever book. It's so clever. I think I've read it about 5 times, and that was
Judgment in Stone. I'm going to have to read that one. I
Judgment
think
in
I read
Stone
Ruth
really
Rendell
good.
years ago. I think I did, but I can't remember. If you were to say to me, what did you read, I couldn't tell you.
She's such a good writer. I think her later stuff I didn't always love as much, but the Barbara Vine stuff, particularly A Dark Adapted Eye, which is based about a woman who's been hung for a crime. And then the other one I really like is A Fatal Inversion, which is set during the summer of '76 during the massive heat wave. And that's a really clever book. I'm a big fan of so from that point on, I became less keen on the kind of thriller with a detective, so you like
kind the of psyche, thing. It was more, dark,
I do enjoy a detective fiction from time to time, and I've got to say I love a good Poirot on television.
Well, Mr. McGinty, actually, I'm really enjoying that one because it's a bit different, isn't it?
It is.
And it's sort of the first time we meet Ariadne Oliver, who I really like.
I was about to say that.
And really, I'm listening to it this time. I have read it before, but I'm listening to it now. And I hadn't realised how much of Agatha Christie Ariadne Oliver is.
She's sort of laughing at herself, isn't she? She's like making fun of herself. I've got a real thing about people who sort of say that Agatha Christie's a bit twee and cozy. Her books are so gruesome and so vile. Some of them, it's so awful. I mean,
she writes about really horrible people, and she doesn't suffer fools at all.
I mean, the murder victim on Murder on the Orient Express is somebody who's killed a child, like a terrible child killer. It's just like, and there's some awful stuff goes off, isn't there? It's really bad. And then there were none is really quite awful. They've all done really terrible things. They're all laden with this guilt for these crimes that they've got away with, and they're really awful.
No, that she's not fluffy at all. There's no fluff.
There's the odd one that's a little bit twee, but on the whole they're not. They're quite grisly. I can remember watching, it was the old Joan Hickson one of A Murder is Announced, and there's the bit where she tries to drown the maid. I think she's Swedish or something. It's so horrible because she's got a head, like her head's being dunked into the water, kind of by the murderer. Kind of, you're like, oh my god, this is so gruesome.
Well, she does as well. She has children who are killers. She has children that are killed in her books as well, which must have been quite back then. Must have been quite sort of, sort of remarkable. I imagine it was.
So much so. Because there is a book where the murderer is a child, isn't there? And and The Mousetrap is all about child abuse, isn't it? It's about some child neglect and abuse. So there's nothing twee about Agatha Christie at all, is there really? She was a dark soul.
She is. So what's next for you, Chris?
So I'm at a point where it's probably going to be completely different by the time I finish. But so I'm writing another contemporary standalone thriller. That's probably all I can say about it. But
but you're sort of plodding on with that.
I think one of my edits is going to be, as I go through this, because I'm about halfway through, and I'm thinking, these characters are too unlikable. They need to have something that can make people root for them. The classic one is give them a dog or something, or a cat. I think there's that book, isn't it? It's a writing book called Save the Cat, and it's saying that if you want your hero or heroine to be likable, get them to save a cat's life. Maybe that's what I need to do.
You might need to have that. If a cat pops up in your next book, I'm going to know that's it.
I think
he really didn't like this. He thought this person was really bad because they've got a cat.
I can remember saying to my agent as well about Sick to Death when we got a few rejections from publishing houses saying that she's not likable. And I said, she's got a cat. What's their problem? Because Emma did have a cat and she was really nice to it. So I was like, I don't know what's wrong with these people.
No.
She's not a psychopath.
So have you got any plans for Thursday for when your book's coming out?
Well, funny you should ask that. Say, Waterstones in the local Waterstones in Hastings messaged me because I did a panel there last year, and they asked if I would host another author.
Oh, excellent.
So I was like, oh, that's okay. So then I kind of agreed, and then I messaged them and said, oh, by the way, my book's out that day as well. So it's kind of like, oh, okay. So they're like, yeah, we'll make sure we've got some in stock then. I'm like, okay. So yeah, it's like it should be my party, but it's not. But it's fine. But yeah, no, I'm actually interviewing a man called Alex Preston, who's written a book that's kind of like, well, let's just slow horses, but in Greece. So it's called A Stranger in Corfu. I think it's probably a bit lazy to compare it to Slow Horses. It's a bit more. It's got a hint of Graham Greene. It's all about old spies who have all been sent away to be got out of the way, and they're all in this kind of place, that little island off Corfu. It's really cleverly done.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to meeting him actually because I really enjoyed the book, so it should be quite fun.
That's great.
Yeah, I quite enjoy an event, so it's something anyway.
A bookie, yeah. So it's a bookie day anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, maybe I'll go out for lunch or something as well.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because the last time there was so much on it, kind of, because I'd never had a book out before. I didn't know what it was going to feel like. Kind of I was, oh gosh, frantically reading people's reviews they were writing to see what they were writing about it. This time I've not read a single one.
I was going to say, how is it different this time?
Yeah, so last time, I don't know, so there's the thing called NetGalley where people get proofs.
Yeah.
And once your book goes up on NetGalley, I think probably what reviewers maybe don't realise is how often authors read their NetGalley reviews, especially debuts, because I know that quite a few of the debuts that I knew, we all became fixated on it to the point where we'd be refreshing it like every 2 hours or whatever.
Oh, really?
And then, and I think
I don't think, because I don't write bad things on reviews.
No. But I think if you've got to be honest, haven't you? And if it's not good, then because NetGalley essentially is not for the writer. NetGalley is for the writer. Should not be there. That's their problem if they're there. NetGalley is for the publishers, so they can learn what the public think, and it's much like Amazon reviews are for readers, so they can decide what to buy or whatever. They're not really for the writer. But it's very hard to get that into your head when you're a new writer, and I think it's a really tough thing because it's so tempting. It's it's like someone's talking about you in another room and you've got a choice whether to listen or not. So I became very fixated, and the issue was that initially they were all 4 and 5 star reviews, so I was like, this is really good. And every time I looked at one, I got a hit of excitement and dopamine kind of flooded through me.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get a 1-star review that's like 1,000-word long essay that someone's written about how much they hate your book. And then you're like, oh, this is really painful. Yeah. And then so this time I haven't looked a single time.
No.
And the only time I've seen reviews is the ones people have tagged me in. And so far, no one has tagged me in a 1-star review, which does happen.
Oh, that's so bad. That's bad form.
People do it more than you'd think. I've only ever had it once with a 2-star, which was actually okay, and I didn't mind. The review made me laugh anyway. It was funny, intentionally partly funny, but also bits of it made me laugh as well. But no, totally bad form. I would never tag anyone in anything less than a 5.
No.
The reviews, my favorite reviews, are the ones where they say, this was the best book I've read in the last 5 years. I thought it was amazing. No, I loved this, loved that. 3 stars. So I always think, then what do you need me to do to get 5? How far have I got to go?
You're gonna like that the best book I've ever read in my life ever.
Yeah. People are really funny, but I think people should write exactly, they should review how they want, kind of. And I think if people want to write bad reviews on social media, then that's absolutely fine. If that's,
don't tag the author.
Don't tag the author, because I think it's the author needs to make a choice if they want to actively seek out their reviews. I think to be tagged in I think I heard a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but about Sheena Patel, who wrote the book called I'm a Fan. And if she got tagged in a review, she'd just put, I'm not a fan. So instead of the book, I'm a fan, it was I'm not a fan, which is good. But yeah, I think it's it's a difficult thing, isn't it? I review books on Instagram, and I get the complete minefield of it, and I really appreciate people's time to write reviews as well. I love reading other people's reviews. But yeah, and I think people should sort of feel, it's their space, isn't it? Kind of Bookstagram and whatever
definitely.
or BookTok, which is a complete mystery to me.
Yeah, I've tried to dabble on BookTok, but I'm a bit lazy. I like Instagram, and that's pretty much where I am these days. Because
Instagram, post a picture, write a thing. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. Although the Instagram keeps telling me that if I do more reels, I'll get more engagement. I'm like, oh, I'm fine.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, it's been a joy. I've really enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too. And The Deathbed is out Thursday. If you're looking for something a little bit different, a bit with some, unlikable but interesting characters,
interesting people.
And
we've got a great narrator for the audiobook. So it's a woman who's narrating Laura, and she's got a great voice that just suits Laura.
Oh, that makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Totally.
Yeah. And so is the audiobook out on Thursday as well?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So it's out in paperback, audiobook. And Waterstones unexpectedly sent copies out today to people who'd pre-ordered, which was a surprise, but that often happens. Yeah, it does.
They are a bit naughty like that. I used to work in a bookshop, and people used to come in and go, "Well, I've got my copy because I got it from Waterstones."
Yeah.
Like, well, we're not allowed to take ours out until Thursday.
It sometimes happens. Yeah, it's variable.
Yeah. We'll have a great publication day, thank you to everybody for watching, and join us again soon. Thanks, Chris.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye.